Hey guys, it's Colleen Gallagher with the Colleen Gallagher podcast. We are a top 400 spirituality podcast with the intention to be a space that you can come and tune in to receive a frequency that will activate, educate, and empower you to begin living a lifestyle you love that supports you financially. If you're returning, oh, hey. And if you're brand new, well, hello and welcome. Spirituality became a passion of mine because I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer at age 14. And after 9 long years of suffering, I self-healed my body, mind, and soul. So in these episodes, I bring you my own voice as well as people I meet along my journey to offer perspective, inspiration, and real life proof that when you choose to follow your dreams, you say yes to what is inside of your heart, that you will begin to create a lifestyle that is wildly impactful, fulfilling, and abundant beyond your wildest dreams. We cover topics from health and wellness, digital marketing, new age spirituality, relationships, global development, and pop culture current events as it relates to the Great Awakening. So get ready, tune in, subscribe, and make sure to leave us a review to let us know what you're loving. You can always email us on my website, www.colleengallagher.co, to request episode topics and let us know how everything's going. I love you, and I'm so grateful for you to be part of this community, and I can't wait for the day I get to meet you and give you a hug. So with this episode, you all, I am super, super excited because this is one that is really going to dive into connection and some topics that are really strayed away from. And I'm super excited for our guest, and I'm going to get into introducing her. But this episode, I just really wanted to say the topic before we get into it. And it's going to be, how does race and culture influence our ability to authentically connect and find love? And so Taylor Morgan McPherson, also known as the Sparkle Queen, so obviously we love her, creator of current events and the Sustainable Sparkle Bar. Soon to be a 32 Sagittarius that's taking LA by storm as the host of new singles events around LA. Entrepreneur by day and TikToker by night. Taylor has built her following through sharing personal stories about her dating life and taking her viewers along for the ride. Traveling to music festivals and events all around the country for the Sustainable Sparkle Bar, Taylor has brought her biodegradable glitter to Coachella, Stagecoach, Lollapalooza, Bonnaroo, Bottle Rock, and more. So for more information, make sure to find her Sparkle Queen LA across all platforms. And with that, welcome. I'm super excited to have you here, and I'm super excited for this conversation.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So before we get into it, I kind of wanted to share the backstory so you guys know like what this conversation, like how it evolved, how it's here. And so I actually went out one night, and you guys can look on it on my Instagram, and it was to the Kyle Chan's jewelry event or jewelry store for being 1 year anniversary. I went with my friend Lauren, and we're sitting there and we sit next to Taylor. And as we're sitting next to Taylor, she's like, "Hey, I'm going to the single event tonight. Do you guys want to go?" And I was like, "I just want to make sure you said single, not swingers." And she was like, "Yes, single." And so I was like, okay. So my friend and I, Lauren, like go to the bar. We wait outside. And ironically, we meet another guy who invited us to a different bar, but we're waiting for Taylor. So we go into this singles party, and we had a great time, and we're like dancing, having fun. So we go to the other bar where I knew this other guy, and we had a couple booze. And anyway, there was a guy that I met that night, and we ended up meeting up later. And long story short, this guy basically was asking me to bring girlfriends, for his guys and all this stuff. It was kind of weird. I think I've talked about this a little bit with you guys before, and maybe a few episodes before. It was a little bit weird. It was a little bit like out there. I was like, okay, like I just met you. Like I'm not using me to bring my girlfriends for your guys. Like this is weird. So anyway, he's like said something around the line of like, we're hanging out, like, who were you with that night or something like that? Or what are your girlfriends like? Or something like this. So I pulled up the photo of the night of when I met him. There was 4 of us girls, and his response was, "My friends don't like Black girls." And I was like appalled. I like didn't know what to say. I was just like, oh my God. And that was like the last time I ever saw him, and I never saw him again. So Taylor came over one night because I really loved her and connected with her. And I was like, oh my gosh, come over. And that was actually the last night I've had the Kardashians Wednesdays, you guys. They've been so busy. But she came over, and I tell her, because she asked about that night, I tell her the story. I was like, well, you have to be honest. Let's share it. And Taylor was like, you would be surprised at how common that is. And I was like, what? And so anyway, we basically had this idea together to do this podcast to kind of de-web and detangle this around culture and race and everything when it comes to dating preferences versus are you walking the line of maybe racism or discrimination. And so we wanted to just dive into this because Taylor is definitely taking LA by storms with dating events. And really, how do we begin to understand these things that people are saying or preferences and all of this? So anyway, so Taylor, that's what we're going to do today. And I'm super excited to start there. And the first question I had for you, because you are this kind of emerging or already dating expert, with singles events and meeting people and connecting with people. What was your initial reaction, when I shared that story in your mind and obviously what you shared with me?
My initial reaction was I laughed. I thought it was funny. And then my next reaction was like, I'm not surprised. Like,
And
it wasn't shocking to me to hear, me being a 32-year-old Black woman. Like, I've heard that so many times from other women, in stories from other women, like hearing things from men, and just from my own experience of knowing which men are interested in me and which ones aren't, right? Like, you can kind of tell right away, and sometimes it's just like, oh, well, they don't date Black women, so it is what it is.
And would you say, like, well, I'm going to dive deeper in that too. And you feel like you've also heard maybe the separate of like maybe men saying to you, like, they don't like white people or Mexicans or Muslim.
Absolutely. Like, a lot of Black people in the Black community specifically want to date other Black people. They don't want to date white people. A lot of Latino people want to stay in their community. I mean, think about Jewish people. Jewish people date pretty exclusively in their community. So like, it's not completely shocking, but the way this guy was so candid to just tell you that, like, right off the cuff, is I guess the more shocking part. Like, he doesn't know you.
Yeah.
I could have been your best friend since childhood, and he's telling you that. Like, he doesn't, like, he had no idea, but he felt so comfortable to just be like, oh no, no Black women. But at the same time, he's saving everyone else's time. Like, if you would have brought us over there and then they were standoffish to us and they were just like not into it, it would have been, awkward for everyone.
Yeah. So I guess I kind of just want to dive into, before I get to the well, I guess it kind of leads in my next part is how do we really define this line of kind of racism, closed-mindedness versus preferences of culture and race in dating and connecting? Like, that was a really interesting part that we went on. And where is that line? Because I've kind of reflected after we've talked, and I think it's a very fine line.
That is a great question. And honestly, that it's never been posed to me like that, right? Like, where do we draw the line between when is it racism and when is it just your preference, right? I think when there is negativity or hatred behind it, that's when it skews into the racist sort of section, right? When it's just like, well, I don't date this type of person because I'm not attracted to that type of person, then that's purely your preference. And it's not like you're saying, oh, I don't ever want to be around someone of that race, nationality, or whatever. But like, when it comes to my romantic partner who I'm going to be sleeping with and potentially maybe having children with, I have a preference on what I would like that to be. Just like, I don't know, people have a preference on what kind of car they would like to drive, right? Like, you have the preference for an experience that you want to have. And to a certain degree, it's understandable. But as long as you're not like being rude and hurtful or, overly biased to anyone, I think everyone is allowed to have their own preference.
Yeah. And I guess because I really believe in like love and connection. I mean, a lot of my brand is around like creating a life you love. And that goes in many ways, whether it's money, it's interpersonal, it's wellness, but I've reflected that because I don't know if love, I mean, we have incredible stories throughout history. I mean, Shakespeare, I mean, different things everywhere, that there's two different cultures that are coming in, like, because in the name of love, it like collapses those physical identities or cultural differences. And so
I think in a romantic way, we want to believe that it does, right? We want to believe that love can collapse those identities, right? But on a surface level base, and even lower than that, especially, I think it has a lot to do with like children. It doesn't, right? In the fantasy world, we want to believe that love can conquer all, right? And that like it shouldn't have to matter your race if you fall in love with somebody. But there's so many things that you have to go through before you get to that falling in love phase,
Totally. Yeah. It doesn't just happen. There's a whole, yeah, that's like, I think that's another thing of like, what do I call it? Like love masturbation, where we think things can just like go really quick. And then it's like, no, it takes a process and a becoming. And something I always say, even if you're married to someone, for you to really know someone deeply, it really takes 3 to 5 years for you to see like a full season of someone's life, of financial ups and downs and death in a family and, weight gain, weight loss, everything that life has to offer. Like, and so I kind of reflected on this when we talked, and language is really important. And I've never taken an NLP course, but I've studied, neuro linguistic programming and how we communicate. And I'm obsessed with language. And I think in my heart, from kind of what he said, it was, in my opinion, a little bit more on the racist side, I would say, because I think it's much better to say, especially for someone just meeting, like, and I think like connection is just important. Like, okay, I'm not going to assume if I just met this girl, then have her friends, like, let's just connect. Let's just see whatever, like, instead of assuming like date, get, Right. I feel like there's this way to communicate instead of saying, I don't like Black people, or I don't like Jewish, or I don't like Muslim, or whatever that it is you're saying, is more to say like, I'm more attracted to men with six packs. I'm more attracted to men who are entrepreneurs. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I'm more attracted to, I don't know, someone that's younger or older. I mean, whatever that is, or 5-year age range. Like, these feel like more expansive things of what you said of like the racist line was kind of like hate or negativity. But I think when we speak in the things of, I don't want this, it's already negative. Like, it's already a put down of something, instead of focusing on what you do want, which is like manifestation. Like, you always will focus, you always get what you focus on, even if you don't want it. Your mind doesn't, your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between like no and like, we call it false positive, saying like, I don't want this. Your mind hears, I want this. So I feel like even in the language, it does come off in a way that offers hate, in my opinion, or offers whatever, I guess. So I don't know what you think about that.
I think that is where it's used into like exclusion, right? Like, he's so comfortable being able to say, I want to exclude this group from what we're doing. And that's where it starts to feel like racist and like there's hatred behind it.
And what would you say? Because like, you kind of said you've heard it. Like, I grew up in Detroit, so this would like not, I've ever flown where I grew up. Like, this would never have been like a thing. Like, I mean, there was small differences you'd say, like, when you're young, I mean, like a teenager, we would be like, why is our hair different? But it was like, you're sitting there with someone else, like, they were Black, I was white, and we'd be like, our hair is different. Like, it wasn't like a thing. It was more of a natural, like, why is that? Like, there was never it was like a little kid curiosity or something like that. There was never a thing of like, you're not allowed, or this, like, that would have like never flown where I grew up, for sure. And so like, when you said you've heard this before of like, whether it's Black people or white people or Mexican or Jewish, what are some of the stereotypes you've heard people say of why they don't like that specific race or culture? I think it's just good to kind of like get them out there so we can all be educated on this.
Sure. I mean, Black women are the most discriminated against race in the dating world, right? So it's like, they talk about how Black women are the least swiped upon on all dating apps, statistically, least swiped upon. And that becomes from stereotypes like the angry Black woman, right? The strong Black woman, we don't need no man, the Miss Independent, that sort of stigma that is, surrounded by Black women because we've had to be so strong. But like, that even that goes all the way back to like, the police locking up all of our Black men and forcing our Black women to be single mothers, forcing them to be strong, independent women. And then they take, what we have become, and then once again, use it against us. Like, that's what's really rough for like the Black community, right? Like, when we try to make something better for ourselves, they then take that and use it against us. So it's like, it even happens in dating, right? Like, as a Black woman, you have to be so extra soft and quote unquote feminine to be seen even close to what the femininity of, say, a white woman is considered. Like, white women are just considered feminine. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to constantly prove it. Like, I feel like as a Black woman, I have to constantly prove my femininity, or even prove like my interest, right? Like, a man will text me and say, oh, well, you don't really seem that interested. And I'm like, do you understand that like the fact that I'm texting you back and I'm responding to you means that like I'm interested? Like if I wasn't interested, we wouldn't even be having this conversation at all. You're talking about like reciprocating, right? And like, but it's like, would you say that to another woman? Is that just you? Or like, are you saying that to me because there's already this societal stigma that I am harder, rougher on the outside, like hard shell. So there's a lot of it that I think that we deal with as Black women, and that I guess we were trying to uh change the narrative. I know I'm definitely trying
Yeah.
to change that narrative.
Yeah. Like these are things like I mean, I've obviously known as I'm, getting my PhD in psychology and we're looking at global leadership and change. I mean, I mean, it's obvious there's a difference in Black America versus white, like like income and zip code. Like there's obviously these are just research statistics that are objective. Now you can play with different storylines in those numbers, but it's something that I've learned more about. But these things I never really heard ever in dating. And so, what would you also say you've heard if it was Mexican or if it was white? Like what have
Well,
you
let's say
heard?
like the Asian man is the least swiped upon man, right? So often women will say, "Oh no, I don't want to date Asian men." There's so many different, negative stereotypes about them. That's not my community, so
Yeah.
I won't go too much. But like I can also say that like Black men get stereotyped against for being like too aggressive and like, people not being interested in that, or for being broke, or for being thugs, right? Like there's so much negativity around a Black man thinking that he can't afford to do the things that like you would potentially want to do on a date. And it's just like, none of that's true. I'm sure it's true for some, but it can be true for some people in any community now, like, oh,
Yeah.
like, for instance, for Latina women, they always say, oh, feisty Latina, spicy Latina women. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of Latina women that aren't spicy or feisty at all. And they're probably like, I'm very chill, like
Yeah.
a more mild person, but I get labeled this just because of my race.
Yeah. And it's funny because well, it's not funny, but the only thing I'm thinking of now, like with one of my girlfriends that said that this is totally different, but they were like, Black men are the best because they always treat their mother with the most respect. And that was like the extent of what I heard about this. I was like
That's a
totally
good one.
opposite than what you
Yeah.
just said. But it was funny because I was like, you're actually right. Like every, Black man I know does treat his mother with she is like the queen of all queens. And like, I was reflecting on what you're saying because maybe it's just, shelter or I the friends I keep, I always had, well, I guess I did in college one time. There was a girlfriend of mine, she was white, and she looked at my picture wall one time, and I had this picture wall, and she said, have you ever noticed your friends are so diverse? Like you don't have that many white friends. And it was like, I looked at my thing, I was like, I actually never knew that. Like I just like
Yeah,
looking
you
at
never thought
whatever.
about it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just, because I see, I mean, not that I'm unaware of obviously a skin tone or a gender difference, but it's not like the predominant thought of my mind if I'm going to hang
Right.
out with Susie who's Black or she's Mexican or like
Right.
that's not like, I just think of them as their name and who they are and I'm, we're getting together.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting with those. And I just find it fascinating because in my opinion, and you did say this when we were at my house and I'll kind of go into the next question after this, but you did say this at my house of like, you didn't think that what he said was racist. And some of these things you're saying now, I do feel like it's a form of discrimination because it's separation and I think it's fine to say, I want to marry someone who's Christian. I want it, but that doesn't mean you have to sit there and say, I'm not gonna see this person because they're Jewish or they're like, you don't have to say that. You can just say, this is my desire, this is what I want, and framing it in that way so it doesn't come off as this thing. Or, my preference, like for me, my preference is an entrepreneur guy. Like I would never really date a corporate guy. It's not bad, but it's just my preference. But I would never say I'm not going to date, like I just did there, but I'm not going to tell someone like I'm not going to date. I would say my preference is entrepreneur. If I meet someone and they're a corporate guy, sure, I'll talk with them. I'll do something, but like going on a date or more intimate, I wouldn't move it
Absolutely.
forward that way.
Yes. Oh, you just said the perfect word, move it forward. Because I was just thinking that, right? So the event that I just hosted, singles game day a few weeks ago, which was really successful, I gave people these little red zone tickets. And there was a great mix of people there, a good mix of like guys and girls. And one of the guys was there is very intentional about the type of woman he wants to date. He talked to just about everybody that was at the party. And there was a girl, he's Black, there was a girl, she was white. She goes to give him her red zone ticket. And like he had a conversation with her. He wasn't immediately like, no, but he told her, he was like, I don't want you to give me your ticket because I'm only interested in Black women. But it wasn't like, I can't talk to you. I don't want to have a conversation with you because I'm not, about you. It was like, you seem very nice. I think you're great, but you are not my type. Just so you know, before we move this any more forward, I'm letting you know that like, that's not going to happen.
But I like how he didn't say I didn't like you. He said that's where I felt like the issue was and what occurred with what happened with me, because it wasn't like this. I knew this guy for, like you said, an extended period of time. And I was like, it was like this guy who was like asking, hey, bring your girls. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not doing this. And then, and I mean, I'd never heard that from a friend, a long term, like, someone, let alone like a total person. Like the only, I would say like this was blatantly racist, but the only time I'd experienced something was when I was in Houston, Texas. And when my coworker and we went out to one of the bars, and he couldn't get in, obviously, because he was Black. They said it was what he was wearing, but then a white guy was wearing the same, like literally the same shorts in a different color. So like, that was like, and I did like say something to the cop. I was drinking, so I don't remember exactly what, but I said something, but that was like blatant, like, oh my God, this is whatever. But this had that same like alarm bell in me.
Like, I love that. I love that, but I love that you said that, because I've talked about this about racism before. There's a lot of people that will say racism is not a feeling. To me, it is a feeling. You could say the same words in different ways and they feel differently. So you were there, you were with him, you heard him say it and the way he addressed it, and you got that feeling of, oh, this doesn't feel right, like this is racist. Then 100% it was,
Yeah. And it's almost like I didn't know how to respond in that, because, when something something hasn't happened in your life before, it's almost like if you were like with someone and someone like slapped you and you've never been slapped, like, it's almost like
you're in shock.
Exactly. You're not like quite sure what to say because you're like, your mind is trying to process
what's happening first.
Yes, because it's like so out of
you're like, what?
Out of your reality. And so I just kind of remember saying something like, oh, that's really weird. Like, I think I said, like, that's really weird. Like, it should be about the quality of the person or something, I think I said. And then I shortly left after that. Like, it was like, I was just like over it or whatever. And I just think, before I move on, like, I think what's important, I want each of you to know listening, is like, Taylor and I are both saying it's safe for you to have a preference of, I would, prefer to date white or Black or Mexican or a six-pack or entrepreneur or Muslim or Christian, whatever it is. Like, it's safe to have that preference, but I think it's communicating about what you want, not what you don't want. And especially to people that I think that's it. There's no like, especially anything. Like, I think that's like a period.
I think this guy was being doubly racist, like, as I'm telling you this, because he just met you. Like, we said that multiple times. Like, he just met that he didn't know you, but he's racially profiling you as a white woman, feeling comfortable enough to say this about your Black friends, thinking that you're going to be cool with it. You know what I mean?
He was Mexican.
Like, and he was Mexican. You know what I mean? So there's so much different, like, race, stereotypes, misjudgments, all of that happening in that one little exchange. And it's just like, why? You know what I mean? It's so uncalled for and unnecessary.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing I'd like to just kind of hear, because I've never heard it, or I think it'd be interesting here, is like, what do women or men say about white men or women? Do they, like, I'd be curious of what that is. I've never heard any of this. So it's like I'm learning with you.
From what I've heard about white women, it's like the white woman is soft and sweet and like docile and like, really nice. Like, when you talk about the girl next door, like, no one ever pictures a Black woman when you say the phrase the girl next door. It's always like such a sweet white woman, so like that is one of the definite stereotypes of that. The white man, I mean, those stereotypes don't even go into racism. There's just so many different stereotypes of like, what the cisgender white man is seen as these days, right?
But you're so right, because when you say like when you say the girl next door, immediately my imagination, I picture a white woman. But when you say a Southern woman, immediately my mind goes to a Black woman.
There you go.
And I can like physically, and I'm not saying like I don't know, I'm doing it on purpose, but just obviously however I was programmed or whatever I've learned in society, physically, my mind, what I see is that, and I can picture distinct differences in both of them by you saying that. So that's fascinating.
Or if you say like Southern Belle, you're also going to think of a white woman with big hair and a thick accent, slightly different.
Okay. So the next question that I wanted to go into, I mean, we kind of went into it a little bit, but where do you see it's dangerous? And this is interesting for me. I've thought about this, to have preferences, like to say like, just Black or just white or just Muslim or just Christian or Mexican or Malta or European, whatever. Like that's my preference and that's it, versus being open-minded to someone, regardless of religion or race or background, to give yourself an opportunity of love. Like, where do you see that line of like being dangerous versus like, truly open to what the universe wants you to experience with love?
Well, you could totally miss out on people. I will even share this about myself. When I grew up in a very predominantly white area, white Jewish town. So like, in high school, the people who I had crushes on were almost always white. I think there was like a Hispanic guy that I had a crush on once, usually white. And then when I started to get into like my early 20s, like the men that I was like dating and just around were white. But I would always tell my friends, I would be like, oh, this white boy thing is just a phase. Like when I turn, when I get into my 30s and really look to start settling down, like I'm going to date a Black man, right? And I would always say that. And I really believed, at the time, I believed it to be true. But now here I am, early 30s, and I've gone through this whole like spiritual journey of myself and like, was really figuring out what I wanted long term. And I had to come to the realizations that I was closing myself off to opportunities by excluding people, right? Being like, oh, I only want, this specific type of people. It's like when you look at the numbers of the amount of humans there are on the earth, right? And then you narrow that down to the people who are going to be of the gender that you want. And then you narrow that down to the people who are going to be of the age group that like qualifies you. And then you narrow that down again. When you start narrowing it down to race, the amount of people who you have an opportunity to connect with just becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's like, when they say there's plenty of fish in the sea, why would you want to keep like taking fish away? Like you don't want to do that to yourself. So like that's the point where like it gets dangerous, because it's like you don't know what you're missing out on if you're just already counting people that you haven't even met out of the game. Like it just doesn't make any sense. So it's like when I thought about it like that, and then I also thought about like my previous dating history and like what I'm attracted to, it's like I kept saying like, oh, I would only want to date white men. And then I would go out and like I would get hit on by like a very attractive white man and be like, what am I talking about? Like, am I going to push this guy away just because he's white? Like, no, like that doesn't make any sense, like I just wouldn't do something like that. And like I thought that I would. It sounded good at the time, but it's like I feel like that was just like me being young,
Yeah. And I'm happy you shared that, because I really thought about this a lot after I've lived a little bit of a unique life, I guess, because I've been to over 45 countries. I've lived in 5 countries. I don't have like a type. Like I'm like the true thing of like, I don't have a type or whatever. Like there's no, like I've dated, not every, but a lot of different, what's it called? Countries or people from, whatever, race, sizes, tall, shorter. Like there's never been like a little bigger
no through line.
Fact. Yeah. Like there's been no like, thing. It's been more of the characteristics between everyone has been similar, but it's the shape is different. Shape or look is just whatever. So I really obviously, and a huge part of my brain is just believing in love. And I think even like what was even more awakening is when I just went to Egypt and Jordan this year, which I'd never been to a Muslim country. Obviously there was, I'm never too programmed anymore because I've already traveled so much, but there is mind programs we have running in us in America with Muslim culture. Like there just is, because of things that have been put into our mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I, went there and I had different ideas, about, let's say, women's rights or fashion or just, whatever. And I was shocked. I mean, I think everything in my mind was shattered about what I thought a Muslim country or religion or man was like, and experiencing it for myself. Like it was like a night and day difference. And that maybe would have been something in the past. I'm like, oh, I never would have thought of it. But now I'm like, it always just taught me even more. I've like, just be open to what someone is, because you never know what could happen. And you never know if you're open to the possibility of love, and you have like your values, what your values are. You have a clear sense of like purpose or mission. And I know you talk like you've been on the spiritual enlightenment path, like I have as well. And when you're on that path, like, okay, you obviously, if you are on that path and these are your values and we have similar, whatever, these other little tactical surface things, we can maneuver them or find a way. And so I feel like it's really dangerous to have hard preferences. Now, obviously, if it's something like, I don't want to date someone 10 years older, sure, I get that. That's like, but there can even be a missed opportunity of a moment, not forever, but in that. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting, especially because you're doing singles events of what you saw in that. And so do you think more people come in with already preferences around this, or you think more people?
Absolutely. People come in with their hard preferences when it comes to dating. That's probably one of the places where people have the most preferences, right? On all the things that you do in your life. Maybe that and like your diet. Like, here in LA, people are super vegans and they don't eat gluten and they don't eat dairy and cheese and all the stuff and sugar, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? And they're strict about that. And that'll be like the one other thing that they're as strict about, like what they will and will not date. Like people make lists, right? And they're like, this is specifically what I want. And they are not willing to venture too much farther out of that. But something that I preach to the people who follow me is like, expand your horizons, be open. Like you keep saying that, like be open to the opportunity, consider something else, because you literally don't know. The amount of people that I have either seen the couples talk to about it, like talk to on the internet, who are like, I wouldn't have expected to be with the person that I'm with right now, but I am, and it works.
Yeah. And that's my first book, Live Your Truth. Step 1 is be open. Like it's done, and you just have to do that. So I think it's an interesting one. So I'm happy we kind of went through that. And kind of the last question I had for you around this is, what do you think we can do as individuals? Because, right, we can't control society or the government or the media or anything else, but what can we do as an individual in the area of having preferences with who we want to date and communicating in a way to be mindful and inclusive?
When you say communicate it, like communicate it to who? Other people who might help us match us up. I think you kind of said it really well. Like instead of saying I don't, especially because of the whole manifestation thing, like I believe in that too. Like you can't say I don't, or like I don't want. Like you just have to speak with what you do want. So talk about what you do want, and then you'll get more of that instead of trying to like exclude, And then also, like when it comes to manifestations, people talk about it all the time. They manifest a person who physically looks like what they wanted, but on the inside is not at all the person that they thought they were going to be, and they're just like awful. You know what I mean? So it's like when you really are wanting to manifest a person and like manifest love, like you have to call in the qualities and the characteristics of the person that you want, and try to leave the idea of race out of it, and then just hope that you will be attracted to that person. And then also try some new things. I talked to some women at my event the other weekend who were Black women, and they're thinking about, dating white men they never have in their life before, and not because they didn't want to, but they just also didn't have the opportunity. So that's something else that we didn't really touch upon, is that like people who live in areas that are not diverse don't have the opportunity to date outside of their race. So it's not quite like a hard and fast preference. It's just all they know. Right. So it's like, how would they ever experience anything else? And it's like, well, when you're here in LA, you have the opportunity to do that. And it's like, if you're on an app, start matching with people that maybe you didn't immediately, maybe you weren't immediately going to say yes to them, give them a chance and then see how it goes, see how those conversations go, and then try to value them as the person that they are instead of just what they look like. Somebody was saying something to me recently, like, think about it, like looks fade. If you really want to be with these people like for years and years and years, like there's going to be a point where like they're not going to look the same way that they looked when you met them. So it's like, what are you really connecting with them on?
Yeah. And I mean, I didn't do this on purpose, but it's ironic because my friends have, laughed at me because they're like, we never know who Colleen's gonna like, what she's gonna bring or who she's gonna be because it's all over the fucking board. But the truth in what I said earlier, and I meant it, is like that my values though have always been like freedom, truth, adventure, creativity, God, like feeling like, and in a relationship, and even with my friendships, like I high value, like the number one value for me is, this person, whoever I'm dating or to number one, is there opportunity to grow in this, grow as a person, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and is there room for them to grow? Because there's going to be conflict. There's going to be pain. There's going to be drama, as in you have in any relationship in your life. And is this person who I'm going to go through these multiple experience within life endure these things, is there growth opportunity? And for me, if I don't see that as a characteristic or quality together, it's out. So like, I've always been really clear on those and like what it is I want. And then that's how it's been like, I guess, all over the board, because my attraction point isn't a color or a shape, right, or yeah. And I think love, it doesn't happen in a moment. Like I think experienced a lot of heartbreak and a lot of pain that I wouldn't wish upon people. But like I had, these things that I had to really look like I was moving from this country and this state and going here and this, and like I had to look at how to cultivate relationships and like get people away from me that I knew weren't good, and then keep the good ones, and like have this, I don't know, coping mechanism, I guess, to relate. And that I think is what's really important when you're looking for someone, and beginning to really even shift the paradigm in culture, is like you as the individual getting clear on that for yourself and not Xing someone for anything else. So that was kind of my opinion of it closing, I guess. And I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to close or kind of wrap up with, because that was kind of my last question, or things you wanted to share or educate that I didn't touch on. You can share.
I think that was great. No, yeah, I think this was great. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thanks for being on. And I'm super excited to share, but I want to make sure you guys go follow Taylor. It's Sparkle Queen LA on TikTok and on Instagram. Her TikToks are amazing. They're so fun to listen to, and she's like so real. So you definitely, if you don't have TikTok, get it. But she's on LA. And those of you who, I know I have a lot of you who host events on here, if you are looking for someone to have like a Sparkle Queen bar, if you want to talk a little bit more about that sustainable bar, so that the people that do host events and listen to this know a little bit more about you and what to book you for.
Absolutely. So the Sustainable Sparkle Bar, I do biodegradable glitter body art and sparkle makeup, kind of euphoria style glitter eyeliner, glam looks. It's great for the holidays that are coming up, really fun for a Christmas party. And it's eco-friendly, biodegradable, super soft, cosmetic grade, fine and like smooth on your skin. It looks really fun. Holidays are glitter season, so you can reach out to me on Instagram if you're ever interested in booking a party like that, or even like a more larger scale event. And then my next singles event is going to be Sunday, December 11th at the Nickel Mine at 1 p.m. So if you guys want to RSVP to that, you can find the links in my social media bios.
Perfect. Yay. Okay. Make sure you guys follow her and you guys are there. And then I love you guys. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you guys soon.